Well, welcome to GITA's first kind of open webinar about return on investment, basically, and strategies for implementing IT and GIS. My name is Talbot Brooks, and I'm the president-elect of the association, and we wanted to take just a couple minutes up front to introduce you to the organization if you're not familiar with it, and to introduce you to Dave, the speaker. GITA is a professional association. Our primary focus is on education, and hence the webinar today, and we also strive to be an advocate for anyone who's trying to use geospatial technologies to help operate, maintain, and protect infrastructure. And that includes, and has typically been one of our wheelhouses, the utilities and telecommunications companies, and also some of the public sector. So we are experiencing kind of a reorganization as a professional association. And if what you hear today strikes a chord and is something you'd like to be involved with, we ask not only that you look forward to future webinars like this, but also volunteer, become a member, join. We'd love to hear more from you. If you simply hit the info email on the GITA website, which is gita.org, or email me directly at tbrooks@deltastate.edu, we'd be happy to tell you more and to help you get involved, because there's room for everybody.
I'm going to switch down, go down one more now, and get on there.
There we go. GITA has a very long history. We've been around almost 30 years. It is a nonprofit, independent professional organization. We have a very rich history of partnering with public and private organizations. And this includes doing research, whether it's with the American Water Works Association or for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, talking about critical infrastructure and emergency response. We're again advocating the use of GIS and providing education to folks about how the technology works. Also, we have a pretty well-organized network. We provide representation at the state, local, and regional levels, as well as to federal agencies through committees such as our Federal Liaison Advisory Group, and through individual members such as Dave, who you'll see participates in the National Geospatial Advisory Committee. We are heavily represented and reach out regularly to the utility sectors, and have quite a reputation now for best practices. In fact, we've published several of those. There are lots of communication channels available, whether it's working with us through GIS research projects, webinars such as this. We just wrapped up an oil and gas conference in Houston, and local chapters support a lot of what we do as well through seminars and helping us put some publications together. Next slide. Today's speaker is Dave DeSera. He's just the GIS god. That's about the easiest way to put it. He is the Vice President, Chief Technology Officer, and IT Practice Director at EMA Incorporated up in the frozen North Tundra in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. He was a former Chief Information Officer at the First Insurance Company of Hawaii out in Honolulu. Why he made that move back to that freezing weather, I'll never figure out. He sits, as mentioned, on the National Geospatial Advisory Committee and has contributed substantially to some plans for workforce development as it relates to geospatial in the U.S. He has been our research chair for the past 7 years. He was president in 2002 and has served on the board of directors from 1997 to 2003. So please join me in welcoming Dave. I hope you get as much out of this as possible. And again, we will try to make this webinar available and accessible through our website. And as this doesn't appear to be too huge a group, we'd like this to be as interactive as possible. Follow up with questions, ask questions, let's be involved, and we want to make sure you get what you need out of this presentation. Dave?
Thank you, Talbot. So, just some housekeeping, just quickly. If you do have questions, it would be great to keep this interactive. I've got about 30 slides, so I'll try to get through them quickly, but I think the more interactive we make it, and I know a lot of you have a lot of experience in this area, so sharing your experiences would be helpful. So just a little context about this particular topic. It's one that's kind of been a challenge for me, being in the roles I've had over the years, being more on the IT side of the house, GIS side of the house. And it's an ongoing challenge regardless of whether we're talking about GIS technology, customer information system, work management information, that type of technology. It's a challenge to get alignment, and especially with IT and GIS strategies in general. So that's really kind of the reason why I thought it would be of maybe interest to folks to have a seminar like this to talk through that. And I start out section 1 talking about communication, but that's really the essence of, I think, most of our challenges that we face. And in most cases, it's a lack thereof, as the slide talks about. So it's this chasm that really exists in many organizations, including my own sometimes, where we've got the non-technical folks more dealing with the business and operations side. And I'll speak to most of this from maybe an organizational utility perspective.
Contact the host, but of course there's no way you can do that.
Are there any challenges out there? So I just noted that I heard somebody say contact the host.
Yeah, we are unable to get to the web session.
The web session it says it's limited to 25 participants, and we must be over that or at that because it's not allowing any more people to join.
All right. Let me do this. There shouldn't be a limitation on that. Let me check in with one of the technical folks. So, Talbot, I'm going to hand it back to you for just a moment, and I'll be right back.
Sorry about that, y'all. We'll just kind of take a pause here while Dave gets that squared away. This is our first time doing this, so we're a little new, so I ask your forgiveness. We might take this time. Does anybody have any questions or comments about GITI? I know there's a lot of changes happening, and there's been a lot of questions out there. Are there any questions about the organization that I can answer?
Hi, this is David Phillips at Enbridge in Edmonton, Alberta. I have a question in regards to membership now. How does that work and the attendance to the GITI conference?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Membership will continue. As it has been, pay $150, you get to be a member. What we're really focusing on, though, is the return on investment for that membership. What we've realized, looking at our conference attendance over the past 3 years, is that it is extremely difficult for folks to travel. Most are provided the opportunity to go to one meeting a year, and it used to be GITI was the place to come choose your GIS solution. Now everybody seems to have a general package in hand, and so they're attending user conferences hosted by the vendor. For example, you just look at the attendance at the ESRI meeting and see that it continues to rise, the same with Intergraph. So some of the things we're trying to do to help folks get a little more value for their membership is you'll look to see more webinars like this occurring. We're trying to hit at least a once monthly basis. We are going to make an incredible amount of content available and searchable through the internet. And we're going to start some interesting services, namely if you're a member, when you log in, the webinars like this that you watch or participate in, we're going to serve kind of like a registrar at a university, and that we're going to keep track of that for you. So at the end of the year, you can say, give me a report card for all of the professional development activities that I've done. You can either take that and turn around and hand it into your boss to satisfy that if it is a requirement of your job, or it will be a means of tracking your participation for professional certifications such as the GISP. You'll recall that the GISP designation requires that we participate in continuing education like this. There are some other things that will be going on. Of course, we will continue to have the Oil and Gas Conference, and we may look at doing some smaller regional events that don't require us running out half a city's worth of hotels and a huge convention center. It's just the realities of again, travel and whatnot have to set home. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Well, corporate membership fees, is that going to be, because we have previously had a corporate membership, so it enabled, I think we had four able to attend the GITA conference, Oil and Gas Conference.
Right, and I think the reality of what we've been looking at is we used to make the distinction between a corporate sponsor and what we called a user affiliate membership, and I think rather what we're going to do is kind of play a little semantics with the category names, and this is still under discussion, and we'd love to hear your opinion, but where we have an organizational sponsorship, and there will be some special incentives to continue that. For example, we're considering, as we redevelop our website, creating a web store, and if the organization wanted to have a link out for GITA members to access, that's one thing. It would also continue with a number of complimentary memberships for individuals within your organization, so that wouldn't change. And it would obviously translate then to the conferences.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Calvin, I'm back.
Okay.
So just a quick update. We got a call into Cisco to find out why there's a limit. So I'll. So my apologies for those that are online listening at this point. As soon as I should know something in a few minutes here, what the response is. I guess worst case is it is being recorded, so you'll have a chance to look at it. But I apologize for this technical limitation on us here. All right, so I'm going to continue on. Go ahead.
Echo Electric is able to connect now. We're not receiving the restriction message anymore.
Very good. So if everybody can try again, that would be awesome. All right, so I'm going to move on. So I think the point of this one slide that I started is that there's this issue that challenges all of us relative to the jargon specific to, that space, that technology space we work in, and that's the big challenge that we run into relative to the business side of the house, or the operational side of the house, I should say. That creates, many issues as it relates to this whole concept of how we align technology with the business side of the organization. So if we can't align, we can't communicate is kind of the bottom line. So this whole concept of the Tower of Babel, and from kind of the IT perspective, GIS perspective, when the business side and the GIS side find it difficult to communicate, we oftentimes just stop talking or communicating. And of course, we all know what happens, especially if you're wearing kind of an IT management hat here, is that, you start seeing these other systems multiply within the organization. So all of a sudden we start having multiple GIS systems or multiple database systems, multiple maintenance, data maintenance processes, you go on and on. And of course, for any IT manager, GIS manager, it's kind of the worst case issue for us, because then we've got to be worried in many cases how we're going to manage that, and that requires more time and more effort. or more challenges from the standpoint of, asset data being managed within the work management system, but we also got the same asset management data being managed in the GIS system, or possibly multiple systems, and then what's the one source of truth relative to that data? So that's part of our ongoing challenge and issues that we struggle with. So, just a quick quiz. So, what's the number one task on most CIOs' to-do list for the better part of the last couple of decades? So, figuring out how to align strategies with the rest of the organization has been an ongoing challenge and continues to be. So, for those of you that get kind of IT-related magazines like the CIO or whatever, that always shows up as probably one of the top 5 issues from year to year and has for quite some time. So, alignment around business and IT and GIS. There's a number of factors, and you can add your own. So these are some that I've accumulated over time that I've noted. And I've got a slide for each one of those. So I'm not going to speak in any detail on this particular slide, but the only point is that there are a number of things that I'm going to speak to now that will talk into some level of detail into each one of those. And I've tried to present in almost every case an example or two of some personal experiences I've had in these areas. And if you have some information to share there as well, that would be really nice. So the first one is looking at GIS or IT as a contributor. Hello? Okay. So, part of the challenge I often find, and, it's gotten so much better over the last few years, is understanding how GIS as a tool can be used to really contribute to the organization. A lot has to do with communication and understanding and being able to demonstrate that technology from a business standpoint. But this perception of, technology as a strategy within an organization has been around a while, and it's important from that standpoint that the folks involved, especially from the business unit side, understand that it can be used as a strategy to support business needs, and how to do that, and how to instill that within an organization, because I think as the technology advances and we have new solutions that come out, keeping people educated is a challenge, not only within an IT or GIS organization, but also across the organization. It's really hard to keep up with the advances and the rapid advances. And then, the emergence of that new technology and recognize them and help everybody understand how that can be used to support improved performance within an organization. So, here's a couple of examples or ideas about how you potentially could do that. The communication, the value of the technology is a key resource. How do you do that? Do you have a communications plan in your organization that you regularly communicate, or some kind of tool that you regularly communicate or demonstrate the technology? And I'm going to talk more into the second bullet coming up, but how does technology fit within your business strategy and operating plans, right? How do people get to know what that technology can or can't do for you? And especially GIS technology, because GIS technology in many organizations kind of grew out of, let's move from manual mapping to automated mapping, and then to this function that provided this spatial and linear analysis capability. And I still find in organizations today, managers looking at GIS technology as an automated mapping tool. And that's as far as they've taken it. And it's a challenge for them to think about it from the standpoint of an enterprise tool. You start talking about enterprise tool in GIS, and it's like, really? So it's like getting them to help understand that. So it's a lot having to do with communication again, and also how does GIS fit within the overall technology governance within the organization in terms of how you make decisions, and what participation is there at the decision-making level around technology and technology decisions. And I think the other thing that you've probably found, and I certainly have found in the organizations, for me personally, within the organizations I've worked for and organizations that I help to work with, is that when those business units take responsibility and get engaged with the implementation and the associated change, we're going to all have a more successful implementation. Next, organization-wide involvement. So when you're looking at GIS from an enterprise perspective, or IT in general, you're starting to look at these enterprise solutions. This collaborative relationship between the business and IT and GIS functions really requires some kind of strategy to achieve that alignment. It doesn't happen without some kind of strategy or plan or, active involvement on both sides to make sure that takes place. So, what does that organizational-wide participation mean? So, it can be cross-cutting and should be cross-cutting, and really because many organizations at the management level are going to look at their staff to make decisions, and they're going to ask them questions. And so having that understanding across that organization is going to support that buy-in. And, the GIS managers, the CIOs, or the IT managers need to be actively involved in the business strategy development. And this is a challenge in many organizations today still, where when you talk to the IT or GIS manager, they're not actively involved with key strategy development or key business decisions that, where technology like GIS or other IT solutions can really make an impact or have an impact. And so making that happen and making a case for that to happen is oftentimes challenging. I'm working with a very large, actually one of the largest water utilities in the U.S. right now, and they're still trying to figure out how to get even the CIO level reporting to the CEO level of the organization, because of just past structure and thought about technology not being a strategy for that, for the organization, and making those organizational changes or realignments to really support that. So it happens at all levels within the organization, and oftentimes I find that working with the smaller organizations, it's a little easier just because there's oftentimes less organizational challenges associated with those smaller organizations, but that's not always the case. The utility director and upper level managers need to be actively involved in the strategy development as well. So how do you get them engaged in helping them understand how this technology can support their need and involved in understanding of the strategies you're thinking about in terms of rolling out, this technology, whether it's mobile to support better workforce productivity in the field or whatever it might be. So again, it's back to, how you communicate that. So organizational culture and communication oftentimes plays a big role in that and tends to affect how well or not that goes. So a supportive organizational culture is required, bottom line, for a solid relationship between the business and operations side and the IT and GIS side to achieve this alignment. So it starts with that executive level with the view that this technology is a business resource that can be used to achieve business results. And I know as time goes on and we all become more technology literate, that's going to happen. But in many cases, especially if they're conservative in nature in terms of your organization and your culture, there's still a challenge today. And there's consistent and effective communication to facilitate that understanding and the mutual benefit of this technology and how it can support the alignment and support the business need is key. I think I've got an example here. So this is just a simple example. As I said, I've got some examples as we go here, but the whole idea of, what's your ongoing, and this happens to be a project communication grid as it's called, but really what's the strategy for communicating information about what you're doing from a program standpoint or an overall project in general. And I go back 15 years to MWRA, if you're familiar with Massachusetts Water Resources Authority, and there's a gentleman there by the name of Steve Estes-Marjossi, who's now the Director of Planning, and he was an early adopter of GIS technology. And it was really interesting when you could go visit Steve's shop, because GIS fell within his organization. He would have map of the month posted throughout the organization. And it was really cool to be able to show from that visual standpoint the value of what they were doing with GIS, which really helps communicate the information associated with this technology. So it's those types of things that people get very creative in terms of how they support the use of that technology and communicate that information across the organization. Governance structure and process as another alignment activity. So governance process must be in place to support this decision making to ensure alignment. And I think this is the one challenge we see over and over again within organizations is this whole how you make decisions about what you're going to do with the technology, with the data, and it is so hard to get alignment when you talk about decision making because there's so many interests involved and potentially so many systems involved, and there's so much potential overlap and or connectivity or reliance from one system to another, and it becomes very challenging. And if you don't have a good structure in place, it makes it even more challenging to come to a good decision or a decision that makes sense and involves the right stakeholders in the organization. So that organizational structure really does provide the mechanisms by which you can make better decisions, especially from the standpoint of accountability and ownership. And so that really does help support the overall decision making, and probably more importantly to help in terms of understanding who's got what responsibilities and that whole concept of accountability. So a couple of slides on this just generally. One is from a model standpoint. I've seen this, you've probably within your organization have seen it many, many ways. What I've noted here is a federated GIS model. A federated model I've seen work in many organizations. It's kind of a combination of both top-down and bottom-up approach. And in many ways, it does support a good enterprise model, but there are things within organizations that don't allow for a federated approach. But in this case, this organization, in terms of just an example here, each business unit has primary responsibility for the application resources and the decisions around those. Every model is going to be a little different to any organization, so there's always nuances in terms of how you might think about it or what might work or what might not work. But in this case, the GIS members reported to the business unit manager, but also they had a dotted line to the central GIS group, and they met on a weekly basis to make sure that what was being done was well communicated and coordinated, and that those corporate or enterprise standards were being followed. And I think for them it provided a good balance between the enterprise and departmental needs, business needs, and really helped support the alignment of GIS with those needs, and also made things a bit easier to manage from that enterprise perspective. I think there's a number of disadvantages that probably many of you could speak to if you looked at this model or had this model, but there is complexity associated with coordination. So again, it gets back to people and people issues and how well you work and collaborate together within your organization, because you've got a lot of other stakeholders involved. And then sometimes there's some issues in their particular case, occasionally create this kind of dual reporting relationship that tend to cause some differences. But it gets back to, as I said, the people and how effectively communicate. Here's a simple process from a decision-making standpoint. This was a governance process that was set up to support both IT and GIS decisions. And this happened to take place for projects, in this case, anything over 50K. And so it's a basic process, not unlike probably many that you may formally or informally follow. But in their case, they had a formal process that was used. And in this particular organization's example, it was a process that was built within SharePoint. So it was a pretty good process for documenting and tracking things. And then setting up triggers to support that. But, it's whatever works within your organization. But again, the point here is that you've got the information organized and set up and formalized in a way to support, effective decision making. So consensus building, another big area here. I think executives must reach consensus about those strategic issues and how they do that on a regular basis. But the same goes for the IT side, and you need that understanding and ability to have consensus among both the business and unit sides for any kind of meaningful alignment. So, yeah, I think it goes without saying that communication and having discussion about, the business unit having those goals, objectives, the vision, the mission of the organization, and, a set of operating objectives, and having a common vision about how, that's going to be shared through a combination of work processes and resources and technology and all of those types of things, and helping set up those organizational priorities and projects based on that. And I think that's, the one thing that I'm seeing more today is that, organizations are doing a better job, or trying to do a better job of getting those strategies, those business strategies in place, so there's a way to link things together, link this technology to this particular process or project because it's important, and that helps justify the need for that kind of thing. And I've got some kind of an example coming up here where I talk about that. So this is a little broader from an IT perspective, but this is one that provides a little sense of business objectives, business strategies in this particular case, in the relationship to the various combination of technologies and processes associated with it, in terms of looking at the relationship and how strong or not the relationship was. And the dots kind of represent at a higher level, this is taken out of an IT and GIS strategy plan, but in this particular case, it really does identify where, priorities in terms of support are and what needs to be done, and then all the detail behind it in terms of some definition and description to support this relationship that's being made within organizations today between these IT initiatives and, the various business strategies within the organization. Another factor in terms of alignment is this longer-term perspective. I know it's easy to look at everything from a daily, weekly, monthly kind of view, but I know that in most cases IT is a long-term type of thing, especially in terms of developing the type of data needed to support some of the bigger GIS programs that I've seen out there. And a lot of times that takes a long time, especially a lot of the integration that goes around it. So taking this longer term view can be very helpful in terms of understanding how to fund your programs, or continuing to fund your programs, or looking at reinvesting in your programs in terms of how that technology is going to support your business need as you proceed. And I think the other side of it is too, that alignment, as I note there on that slide, is really going to be short-lived or provide little value to the organization if you don't try to take on a longer view. Talbot noted at the beginning of the presentation that I once lived in Hawaii and had an opportunity to go to work for a financial company that was based in Hawaii. They had two owners, CNA out of Chicago, which is a fairly large financial company. I think they were a $10 billion or $20 billion a year company, and then Tokyo Marine Nichido out of Tokyo, Japan was the other 50% owner. And there was a very interesting management style between those two different companies. And I saw it from the IT side of the world, where CNA managed from a quarterly basis and Tokyo Marine managed it from a 25-year horizon basis. It was really a very different perspective of how they thought about investment in bigger systems and programs. So it's a bit of a challenge, and I can understand why, in terms of this particular slide here, this longer-term perspective really just does provide the ability for an organization to put in a program that's going to take many years to properly implement and roll out. So, and then ultimately have, sufficient monies in place to support, the ongoing operation and maintenance of that technology and program itself. So What you're seeing right here is a balanced scorecard for me, particularly as I was a CIO. So it gives you an example of what I had to deal with from the standpoint of projects, and really looking at things from a longer term perspective for all the technology projects that I had. And the GIS program within FICO was, fairly small. It was only a few $1 million of a program from a financial company standpoint, but their other systems were obviously much larger. But we certainly had the ability to manage and track, and all of technology stuff fell into the efficiency category of this balanced scorecard approach. But this is another thing that, if you think about it from your company's perspective, if you do use some type of measuring tool like a scorecard, is technology a piece of that, and how is that really laid out that way? Management capability level. This is a pretty interesting one because I think most managers don't really want to know about technology unless you're having responsibility for managing that technology. And so this tends to be a challenge with most organizations because they don't know whether it's a good decision or a bad decision. And I think for all of us that manage technology, it's all relative to some degree because it's like, I've got a business manager looking at me to make a decision about a particular technology, and I've got to look at a bunch of technical folks to help me make that decision because there's so much to know and be aware of that it's hard to know everything. So it does take time, but what I have found is that having some level of understanding, and it gets back to your governance process and involving business unit managers involved in that process. The more they get exposure to that or have exposure to that, the better understanding of technology will take place over time, and that'll go a long way for all of us in terms of helping us and helping align things. And I think it goes on the other side too, from the technology view that the GIS manager, the CIO, or the IT manager, we need to understand how the business operates. And I think for those of you on the call that are, working the consultant realm, if you don't have a good fundamental understanding of, the space you work in or the business you work within, or that service area, you're not as effective as you could be because you don't quite understand maybe how that technology really functions or should function within that industry that you work. So, it's the same within any organization as well. So, having that understanding of how that business unit operates and knowing how that technology can better support that business unit certainly goes a long way for that. So this is an example of the MIT has a program for non-executives, and I was fortunate to suggest to my CFO at the time that he attend that. And it was an interesting comment that he came back to me with after he returned. There are no IT projects, just projects that IT departments bring technological advice to the table to help us improve. And so I wanted to share that because I think it's a really interesting perspective from the non-IT side of the world. And I think it's one that's, has a lot of truth to it. And I think the other side of it is that there's programs in place out there if you've got business units that, might, especially executive level folks that might be available to participate in some of this. This was a 3-day program, and or was at the time, and it's a way to help them understand how to better leverage technology to support their business needs. It's a very well done program. All right, for metrics, I haven't talked about metrics yet, but I think one of the other aspects from alignment is the importance of metrics. And I'll plug GIK did a cost benefit project a number of years back in the research group that really looked hard at metrics and how to measure those from an application by application perspective. And this is, I think, really in line with that there's got to be something in place that can be measured to determine where you're at. And I think the more information you have around that, the better you can sell things. As you know, if you can prove to an organization by putting in a piece of technology that you can save 4 or 5 FTEs annually, and that those people can go off and do other things that are more important to the organization, that goes a long way in helping sell the ongoing support of that kind of technology, or just the implementation of that technology in general. And I think, what I say sometimes is, we need to be able to demonstrate that line of sight to the business objectives when there are significant investment decisions that need to be made. So if you're looking at a fairly large investment to put in new mobile or whatever it might be, the better you can help the business unit or business unit manager or executive see the direct benefit from the technology in support of those business objectives or business unit needs, obviously the easier it's going to be. Because we're, in the process and always challenged with competing for a limited pool of dollars, as we all know. So it's one of those challenges that the more we have, the more information we have, the better. So here's another personal example, just sharing with you in terms of metrics that I had responsibility for. And it really gets down to productivity for everything, if you think about it. How more productive are we going to be in terms of saving time, resources, or whatever? The numbers don't mean anything to you, but many times I was compared to a similar organization my size or higher performing organizations. And a lot of those numbers were based on, percent of staff per total size of organization, that type of thing. Whatever those numbers really need to be, and I think many of your organizations probably have, some type of performance measures in place today. But if you don't, I would, suggest, especially if you're, you don't have those, it would go a long way within your organization, within your, GIS group or IT group to set those up, because if you've got them and others don't, then I think you can make a better case as to why you need to do this or why you need to change that type of thing. So that's kind of a long section 2. We've got about 15 minutes left, and there's a few slides left, and then I thought we could open it up for questions. But I know here there's 3 things that you must do well, and I think it's going to be in some ways a recap of what we talked about. And this really talks about how to bring, the business side and the IT GIS side together. And it really comes down to execution, right? I think that's where we, me speaking personally, the whole concept of putting a program in place sometimes is a lot easier than carrying through and having to execute it. And that's the hard part. And making that, institutionalizing that, I guess is another way to say it, is a real challenge. And I think it's a real challenge in most organizations. But I think, creating this roadmap or how you're going to get there is really important. I think you need to set up that roadmap or plan about how you're going to get to where you need to go, regardless of how simple or complex it might be. And I think it's going to have to be at several levels in terms of being able to present and communicate that information to the various levels within the organization. But that's one, providing a cohesive strategy for both the business and technology side. So, looking at it from both perspectives, I think, is really important. On the technology side, or I should say the business side, there's a variety of aspects to that, right? There's process improvement that may be associated with it, there may be organizational changes that are associated with it. So there are those other aspects that are encompassing from the standpoint of things that need to be considered as you go through that process. And then, again, those metrics of being able to measure the outcomes and being able to, more importantly, probably report the results and do it in a way that people can go back and look at your information and say, yeah, it is true. So one strategy for both business and technology, I worked on this, and I continue to work on this for both me internally within the organization I work for and those that I help in terms of bringing your strategies together, from a technology and business standpoint. And it's sometimes a challenge in how you do that and how you do that in an effective way, because a lot of times you'll see a business plan that's devoid of any thought or idea of how technology as a strategy can support some of those business objectives. And the more that you can think about how to tie that stuff together, I think helps with the communication and broaden the whole concept of that. Understanding exactly how technology will be used to achieve, one of your core business objectives is important. So really having that understanding is a vital thing as well, and helping communicate that. And don't hope for the best. Make sure that you have criteria in place to judge success before you start the project. I think that's the failure that we often have on many projects, is that we don't set up those criteria about how you're going to measure and or track things. And, it's so easy to forget about that stuff. And I do it too, and it's really challenging sometimes to have the time, have the budget to cover that kind of thing and follow through on it, because we don't oftentimes want to take that time.
Yeah, I want to echo to that. It is fundamentally the business wanting to go somewhere, right? And this is where our job needs to come in and convey them. Okay, that somewhere is this direction. So spend your money wisely and one step at a time, instead of promising the la la land that they're going to go and have you for the next 30 years, and it's not going to happen, right? So it's a step-by-step process where data is more important than application, because application is the tool to get us to manage the data to a most efficient way, right? Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah.
So back to my point earlier about, this roadmap and I say this is important because I think the more you can stick to your plan, there's that old saying out there, if you don't know where you're headed, you're not going to get there, kind of thing. And I think this is it to really, make sure that any planned investment in the technology is a direct link to some business objective. And that was one of the slides that I tried to show earlier, where it's like, sometimes there's you need to make a leap in terms of how some of that technology, especially when you're trying to communicate it to the business unit managers, the executives, about how it's going to support it. But I think the more you can make that happen, the more they can see it, the more they're going to say, yeah, that's a really important technology that we need to keep, and we need to invest in. So that's a really important thing. The other, couple points here is to establish those internal processes to allow your team to learn how to make good technology investment decisions is a learning process, right, that we all go through. And I think it's, one of those things that will help from a long-term perspective, because once you start to ingrain that concept into an organization, then, it will grow with time. But you've got to be consistent about making sure that, that type of thing's in place. And then again, making sure everybody knows what the expected outcomes and business results are. So it's being able to deliver that information. Next, measure. Again, what I've already talked about. And I alluded to this already, but best technology projects don't amount to much if you can't determine their impact, no matter how good they are. So measuring that stuff is vital. And collect those metrics and use numbers to measure and test and report those results. So again, being able to report that and being able to communicate that, whether it's a monthly basis or an annual basis, you may be set up from an organizational standpoint to be able to report back on that and how you do that. And if not, then it's something that you need to talk to your manager or executive about in terms of being able to want to do that. And then again, monitoring the outcome for those specific investments and understanding that and learning from it and looking at how to improve it as you go forward the next time. So a few final thoughts. This isn't rocket science. In fact, this is probably the easiest. The concepts around this are really simple, straightforward, and I think understandable. Making them happen is a real challenge. It really is, and because it involves people and existing processes or what have you that organizational cultures and issues and challenges and those types of things that really do play into why some of these things don't effectively happen. I guess the next point there, it's not a technology issue. This is about the organizational process and personal challenges that I just said. I think that's the hardest thing that we've got to overcome within any organization. And the more that you can work with your team to management team, technical teams to try to figure out a better way to avoid those pitfalls, the more successful you'll be. And I think the other side of it is we've got to do a better job of talking and communicating with the rest of the organization, and helping them understand that the jargon, learning their jargon, and stopping the excessive use of our jargon as we communicate, making it simple, keeping it simple. And I think the more we do that, the more successful we'll be. So with that, I'm going to leave a slide up there for questions. I'm not sure if anybody has any comments or questions for me, but I certainly would like to open it up and get people's thoughts, and I appreciate you all bearing with me as we figure out how to deal with the limitation on the WebEx side. I'm assuming everybody was able to get in, but if you didn't, then please visit the website, GIT's website. We'll get that posted here in the next day or two. So.
I just have a quick question regarding data quality, and I think one of the slides, in one of the columns, you put data quality in there, and it basically cut across every single aspect, right? From your perspective, is it absolutely the core business requirement to improve data quality and maintain data integrity and all that? How do you incorporate that in the presentation to sell?
Yeah, I think, if you've got the fiduciary responsibility for maintaining the data at the level you need it to make the decisions you need to be successful within your organization, then you're going to take the time. And I think this has been a big challenge in the past for many organizations, and I ran into this in an organization just recently where it's a very large city, and the Public Works Department and the engineering group within the Public Works Department have responsibility for managing the data for the utility. And when I say the data, I meant the spatial data and the associated asset data. And so their issue so there were some issues about quality of the data because they didn't really have to use the data. They had responsibility for maintaining that data for the organization. And so it was an ongoing challenge for that organization for many years. And as they chose to look at how to integrate GIS in their work management application to support a broader work management and asset management program, they worked hard to come up with a better way of partnering. In this case, it turned into a service level agreement where the focus was really around data quality and the timeliness of the data and the management of that data. And so the data quality piece, I think, is really an issue that each group that has that responsibility for that data, that they've got to have that responsibility because nobody else is going to care ultimately. And so I think it's part of every department and or part of every system team that works together to make sure that quality does. There are processes in place, or practices, or standards, guidelines, whatever they might be, in place to support that quality, the data quality needed to meet the business needs. So I'm not sure that answers your question, but I think it's a big issue across every organization, and the more we can automate and improve the quality from the standpoint of the data, and the less human interaction that we have or innovation, the better. But it really does.
Yeah, that answered my question, and that's exactly what I was expecting to. The question is there a best practice data model for GIS, or I see a lot of processes around business, and is there any, from your past experience, is there the best practice data model for capturing GPS or spatial related data, or?
Well, I think some of those models have been built in. Some of that, I think best practice, like any vendor, they've tried to build in some best practice in terms of how they organize the data, because they need the data organized to support some of the functionality or support the functionality of the application, or how it will be integrated, or how it should be maintained. So some of those best practices, I think, do play out, but it always doesn't solve the problem. And when you start talking about how you integrate data, it adds a whole other level of complexity about the data quality. And I'll give you a real quick example of an organization that was in the process of trying to implement or integrate their GIS system and their work management system, and all the assets had been collected and developed in their GIS application. And they had gotten to the point finally where the field operations folks were going to move into the use of their work management application, and so they were going to take their GIS asset data and move it into the work management application. The work practices around, or the data management practices around that data from a GIS point of view were good. It had been in place for a number of years, but they had to reevaluate all of those when the data got moved into a work management system. And it wasn't so much from a quality standpoint as it was a structural standpoint. And there were issues about moving the data from GIS into work management, and how many-to-one or one-to-many relationship within GIS could be handled, but couldn't be handled in the work management system. And that created a number of process challenges and changes in terms of who had responsibility going forward about how that data was going to be managed and maintained, and ultimately led to some data quality issues to begin with, because all the processes hadn't gotten developed prior to getting those two systems integrated. So, it's a challenge in most organizations when you start looking at the integration side of things. And a lot of it has to do with the format of the data. Maybe not so much the quality, but still there are issues. If you work in the municipal side of the world, how many address databases does the city maintain today? So, if you say one, you're the exception and not the rule. So if you have multiple address databases and you're trying to support a 3-in-1 call center, and having those addresses in GIS and also having those addresses in the work management system, it becomes complex about how you're going to deal with that. Especially when you're trying to locate a work order on an address out in the field, where are you going to pull that address from? The GIS, the work management system, or the 3-in-1, or all three, or if they don't agree. So
you're right on the problem of that we're facing.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks.
Yeah. It's what probably keeps a lot of us up at night. Are there other questions? We've got this open to 12:30, so if you've got questions, we could certainly take this out a little while longer. So, comments, other examples, or things that I said you didn't agree with, or other experiences you've experienced or had. I think it would be helpful for everybody participating to hear that. So.
Dave, I think in terms of developing best practices and sharing experiences, what are some ways going forward that folks can chime in on this subject matter and kind of continue the dialogue?
Kelly, I'm going to push it back to you, because you bring a very interesting perspective given your emergency management responsibilities and all the experiences you've had from a data quality standpoint. And yours oftentimes reside at a federal level or a state level, not even at a local or individual organization level. But what practices have you seen out there from a data a data management or data quality perspective that users could look at?
Yeah, we've seen a couple of things really flop and a couple of things really succeed. The first is identifying up front how to standardize the data. A lot of data collection efforts seem to go forward pell-mell, and key attributes that would create a significant return on investment. For example, we've got to collect streets data, so we've got the address ranges for 911, but nobody bothered to collect speed limit information, so its usefulness as a routing tool is all of a sudden gone. So having a plan for the potential uses, I know there was a question about application driving the data and vice versa, but I think sometimes you might end up spending an extra few percent in the overall collection cost of a data set to get some attribution or some key features that you may not necessarily want now, but you can see being useful at some point in the future. Whether it's a top-down driven data model seems to fail just about every time. It becomes too complex very quickly, and a lot of times the end users do not understand the structure and its design. And I poke pretty hard at the Homeland Security Infrastructure Protection data set that the Defense put out. It's got over 600 layers of information available in it, but nobody knows what they are, how they're organized, how to symbolize them, etc., because it's not a user-driven data set. And then lastly, this is a dialogue that's going to have to happen at the executive level more and more often. When and how do you turn to the crowd to get some of the data and information you need to drive your organization? Utilities do this already without even thinking about it. Outage management is a crowdsourced data set. You've got a customer calling in with the power out, and slowly you develop or sometimes rather quickly you develop a map of where that outage is that lets you do traces and figure out where the problem is that much faster. How can that concept be employed to drive down the bottom line for some of the data collection efforts that have to happen out there? Is it safe to start drawing on sources such as OpenStreetMap? So.
Thank you, Talbot. Other thoughts on that? Anybody else want to contribute to the conversation, regardless of the topic at this point?
I'm Surinder from Asphalt Electric. So is there any way we can improve collaboration between various departments or cross-functional departments to ensure that everybody from different department participates and understand what ultimately strategy or geostrategy trying to help them out?
So, I went back to the slide on the project approval process. The term governance or how you make decisions about things really gets down to, I think, the core of the issue, because I think, if there isn't a good body, a representative body making, really important, making decisions about important things, meaning that say you need to invest some money and or in some technology or perform a project, how you do that in an effective way and gain ownership and understanding. And I think oftentimes when I see successful governance processes or groups, setting up that process is simple. Carrying it forward and, the term I used earlier, institutionalizing it within the organization will be a challenge sometimes. But if you get good representation both at the technical and business level on this governance committee, and make sure that you meet on a regular basis when you need to meet in order to make, good decisions, timely decisions, and probably equally important, putting together the information you need to be able to share when you know, get into that meeting to make a decision and share that information in advance, the better. And I think, you know, it's not rocket science. It's basic, getting people together, you know, maybe having a formal structure in place, and making sure that, you know, the executives within the organization buy into the concept, and that they follow it. Maybe sometimes easier said than done, but I see that being a very successful model in most organizations, especially when it comes to technology decisions. And you'll often find that, you know, there's those technology implementations are more successful as long as those business units are involved in understanding that there are business process implications and or you know, business changes that may have an impact on them as an organization. I was just recently involved with a project I got brought into halfway through. The project was sold to the organization as a technology project, and it was all about process change, about asset data. And so while they thought the technology was going to fix the issue they had, it was really about the process that was really going to make a difference for them. You know, that's a major change in terms of people's expectations going into this project, or, you know, halfway through this project, that had a big impact, that really changed or altered the shape of the project. And so, and it was a painful thing for many organizations, many other folks in the organization. So putting that structure in place will, you know, I'm not saying it's going to solve your problems, but it's going to help with communication and understanding to help you make decisions, and hopefully do it in a more timely way.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
There's a lot of good governance models out there, you know, from an IT standpoint that you can take if it's, you know, looking at it from a GIS standpoint. I think
somebody put you on hold, I guess.
Yeah, I think somebody put us on hold. So I think you know, so those are out there, and, you know, just going through the process of getting that set up. Hopefully you've already got a process in place that's maybe for IT that you can extend to GIS. But you know, that's one way to do it as well.
Yeah. So I echoed it. The way that we focus is the more on the governance side, and I'm from a telecommunication towers company. We've struggled so much from architecture perspective to sell the concept of what's good foundation for the business. They have no idea, because they just like your comments in the slide said, there's no IT project. And they have no interest in infrastructure. They just want the stuff, the report at the end, right? So we keep telling them, in order to get the report at the end, you need to spend your money on infrastructure. Consolidate, make a single source of truth so that you can actually reap the benefit, and also have the process reevaluated, have a governance and data steward assigned so that they know what they can do and what they should do and only what they can do, right? Not go overboard and change other people's data and all that stuff. So all that stuff, it needs to be intact in order to maintain the data integrity. Otherwise, just like the other slide you have as well, eventually it'll back because of the short-term vision. Because there's if there's no long-term ownership, the whole thing's gonna fail, right?
Yep.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic slides. I love it. If I can borrow it, then that would be even better.
Sounds good.
Well, this material will be available on the GIT website, so
Yeah,
I encourage you, if you aren't a member, please do sign up. This is why we exist.
Yeah, but I need to put a slide together to justify the $850, right?
It's $150.
150 or 850?
150.
Okay, well, maybe easier.
sometimes not.
Yeah. All right.
Other questions? Comments? All right. I'll take that as a no. Tommy, you want to wrap us up?
I just want to thank everybody for the participation. Lots of good questions, some great content. And we hope you are motivated to join the organization. And if you'd like to give a webinar or have a paper that you would like to get out there about your experiences or some lessons learned, CRTA is open for business. We'd love to have your participation. And again, thank you for your time. And thank Dave for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.